On this week's NFV and SDN Reality Check, we'll look at some of the top news stories over the past week, as well as speak with TM Forum about the importance of open source in NFV and SDN deployments.
Today's episode is brought to you by Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.net.
Thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief for RCR Wireless News. Well, let's start off the show with looking at some of the top news stories of the past week. Alcatel-Lucent recently announced it had joined Owen Labs' ONOS project, which is focused on developing scalable SDN solutions for telecom operators. Alcatel-Lucent is joining the organization with an expected focus on virtualized multi-layer IP and optical solutions, and joins founding members AT&T, NTT Docomo, SK Telecom, China Unicom, Ciena, Cisco, Ericsson, Fujitsu, Huawei, Intel, and NEC. Owen Lab last month announced a partnership with the Linux Foundation designed to boost open source-based work targeting SDN and NFV. That partnership is said to focus on creating SDN solutions tapping open source software platforms, white boxes, network control, and management applications to boost the creation and deployment of SDN platforms. Also recently, TIA threw its might behind the growing NFV space, announcing plans to launch an NFV interoperability testing laboratory. TIA said the lab is expected to launch early next year, and this will be the first vendor-neutral testbed for NFV technology in North America. The lab is set to leverage standards work being conducted by ETSI's NFV Industry Specifications Group and benefit original equipment manufacturers, solutions integrators, researchers, customers, and end users who can benefit from the new technologies. The testbed is also expected to help support the growing influence of open source in the NFV and SDN world, which is becoming a significant focus for mobile operators, vendors, and organizations. One of the organizations that has been pressing for greater collaboration around open source is TM Forum, which has become a unifying presence for companies looking to boost interoperability between virtualized platforms. I recently had a chance to speak with Ken Dilbeck, who's the head of TM Forum's collaboration program, on the growing importance of open source platforms in the development of commercial NFV and SDN technologies. Let's take a look at that interview now. All right, well, today we are joined by Ken Dilbeck, who's the head of collaboration program at TM Forum, to talk a bit about the open source programs and open source in general when it comes to the move towards virtualization. So, hey, Ken, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, I guess, let's jump off the topic there. So, obviously, when it comes to this world of virtualization, and especially in the telecom space, a lot of talk has been about the need and the importance of open source to really kind of drive kind of an open community for all of this. I mean, obviously, the legacy world in telecom has been driven a lot by, kind of silos of vendors having their own software, their own hardware. And as we move toward this virtualized world, one of the things people are hoping to look for is kind of more of an open community to really kind of, bring in more people and kind of all work towards a common goal here. I guess as we look at the moves that have been made there and the progress that's been made, what's, I guess, TM Forum's view, and also your view of how we've progressed in terms of kind of getting this open source model in place for telecom?
Well, the TM Forum has been actively exploring in the open source space for probably the last 3 to 4 years. Mm-hmm. We actually had an open source community looking at some tooling that we were developing around our APIs, and so we've got some experience in utilizing it and also trying to pull it in. We are actually have all of our APIs are now being openly distributed. We're looking for how to move that model into a true open source environment. One of the challenges that I think that most of the telcos are wrestling with a bit, though, is how do you protect the IPR and the licensing around these models if you go into open source, a pure open source. You look back and look at some of the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned around Linux about suddenly, there's proprietary material buried in the kernel. And we're definitely trying to learn from those lessons. So we're kind of cautiously moving into the open source arena. And truthfully, the mode of most comfort is open distribution, but a controlled development environment, so that that everybody that's working in the development environment actually has released their IPR. They understand what they're doing and they're participating there. We've tried to reduce all of those barriers and make it very easy for that to occur. And I think one of the things you do see more in the open source community than, even, in the great unwashed open source community, you see them actually requiring that release as part of a developer joining the community. They do release the IPR. So we're seeing an increase in discipline in the open source world itself, but we also see this controlled development and open distribution model being something that a lot of people are exploring. In some ways you could use that description around, the OPNFV initiative, the Linux Foundation and the way they control things. They do make those assurances. Eclipse has quite an elaborate process to make sure that they do maintain the IPR purity. So I think that is something that we're learning from the computing industry at large, and I think the overall industry is learning from that. And I think that's what's been the changing factor for why telcos are interested. I think there's another factor there as well, is if you look at the fact that they want to move to a commodity piece of hardware, and you look to what the computing industry has learned about the OS, the Linux OS, and the model there, that open source was actually extremely successful in allowing commodity boards to be highly utilized. Well, if you think about the fact that with NFV, they want to go to commodity hardware, the natural thing is the OS and even the management software that sits on top of it and the control software should be able to exploit the same model. And that's where a lot of the hope for NFV has been placed in. Can we get that open source model in there? Can we get the control plane and the management planes in these boxes that are controlling the network developed by open source organizations? And I think to date, you've seen a lot of success in the proof of concepts and the emergence of things like OPNFV. And, as I mentioned, we're exploring a number of APIs that we expect to be utilized in this space that will be open source for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. Obviously, Linux Foundation has been doing quite a bit in terms of obviously like OPNFV and those other organizations that they've been working through as well to kind of really drive that open community. And they're getting a lot of traction. I mean, it seems like a lot of companies are getting on board with this. Even some of the bigger companies who you would think would be maybe a little more hesitant because they do have a legacy history of having some unique relationships with the carriers. But yeah, it seems like they're getting some pretty broad support, which is a positive thing to see. It does seem like it's helping this whole process move along at least a good reasonable pace too, which is good to see, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. Just had some reports back from the OPNFV event that they're having this week, and it sounds like it was a very successful event. It sounds like their progress has been very good, and the request I got was, let's figure out how we tie into that more aggressively. Can we get some demonstrations queued up for our event in Nice in May, and also be able to reuse those same catalysts at OPNFV's event next June. So there's a lot of synergy in the industry. As you said, there's some very large companies that are interested in both sides of that, but they're also very active members in the TM Forum too. And what we're seeing is a move in the industry is that to bring a lot of the standardization work together, whether it be via open source or through joint working groups or liaisons, the people are not looking at this as a silo effort. They're really looking at it from this is an end-to-end problem. How do we solve it? You guys are really good at X, but in order to get the solution, I need X, Y, Z, and A, B, and D. And, you need the whole spectrum. Yeah. And it's how do you get all of these groups coordinated? And I'm really seeing the appetite in the industry increase to make that happen. We've got a number of initiatives that we've been kicking off over the last 4 months that are very aggressive in this area.
Yeah, makes sense. And it seems too that because the telecom operators themselves are really driving a lot of this move towards virtualization, the bigger operators have been really getting behind this, that it is, kind of not forcing, but obviously helping the larger established vendors kind of come along this program because, again, like you're saying, they might not have the most desire to do that, but when their biggest customers, the telecom operators, are saying, "Hey, this is what we want to do," it tends to get everybody on the same page. It seems like, and that seems to be really helping this whole system move along. Because again, it's such a huge project that's ongoing. I mean, we're looking at like we've talked before about this. This is a huge transformation of these organizations, and this is a lot of money being invested. So the operators want to make sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to this move towards an open source type of operating system out there.
Yeah, and you were mentioning trying to get the vendors on side with this. I think earlier on, NFV was viewed as a win-lose proposition for the vendors. They was going to say, "Hey, we're going to commoditize you. We're going to drive the price. We'll further drive any money out of what you're doing." And what we've been seeing through our catalysts in some of the new work that's coming out, I think the vendors are beginning to see that this doesn't have to be win-lose. We can make a win-win. A lot of the work around some of the closed-loop, intent-based optimization and big data analytics with closed-loop at different levels allows the vendor to differentiate and be able to actually add tremendous value at those layers using commodity hardware, but they're adding a lot of capability through this closed loop optimization, simplifies the operations from the operator's perspective because they don't have to know all that detail. There's almost a delegation of responsibility that says, okay, beyond this point, I'm just going to tell you, I want this service, I want it at this SLA, and I want it at these termination points. And then the rest is taken care of by the hardware. Becomes a self-organizing network and software-defined network. That I think is the thinking has started to change in some of the vendors, and you'll see that very strongly in some of the major vendors in this field. Is that it's no longer viewed as a threat, but this is the opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, because as I get maybe from a reporter's point of view, or maybe a little cynical about the situation. I always look at whenever a bigger vendor says, we're working with the open source community, we're really happy to be working with them. I always think they really can't be that happy to be doing this, but it does sound like, at least from what you're saying, I mean, they are realizing that this is a move that they kind of need to make, and obviously it's going to change their business model a little bit, but. Like you said, though, it sounds like they're realizing it's not going to, it's not going to be that win-lose situation. It's going to be something where they can make this something positive. And obviously, since they do have really good relationships with the operators anyway, it's unlikely they're going to lose a lot of any sort of business because they are going to always be kind of relied upon because of their name and their breadth and depth of what they can offer. They really are going to always have a relationship with the telecom space and always be a big part of this.
Yeah, and a lot of the vendors are very much in the open source space.
Yeah.
Period. Anyway, if you look at the Cisco and the boxes that they use, and if you look at HP, IBM, these guys are big in that space, but not necessarily on the side of the business that's been telco directed.
Yeah.
But I think what they're looking at is they're going, okay, the business model will change, but I think they're getting more comfortable with the fact that it isn't going to be a lose business model change. They can make this a win business model change for exactly the same reasons. They aren't going to have to be riding on the more expensive, higher costs where they were being squeezed on margin daily.
Yeah.
Now they're going to be more into commodity hardware. They're going to be looking at the differentiation being in the software and the intellect that they can put behind that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, squeezing that margin's a little harder. There's more margin left there than there is in the hardware. That's
a good point. You're right, because you always, take a piece of hardware and make it somewhere cheaper, for instance, where, software is a different situation, especially if you have some really unique IPR in there. And that kind of brings up, what you brought up earlier, because it does seem like that IPR piece of this, when it comes to open source, always seems like a bit of a challenge because, In the telecom space, at least, there's a history of IPR really being a divisive part of a lot of standards processes. And, as we moved from 3G to 4G and to 5G, there were all these battles going on in the courts about who owned what and who got a piece of what. And but it seems like, at least in the software world, at least at this point in the software world, that everybody is, maybe it's still so early that people aren't that concerned about it yet, but it doesn't seem like that IPR battle is as brutal or bloody as what it's been, what we've seen in the past.
Well, I'm going to yes and no.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
Well, because, if you look, where within the computing industry and even within the telecom space, where people are saying, okay, open source really works, is where it's addressing non-differential processes. Everybody has to have it. Linux is the OS that, it's everyone has to have an OS. It doesn't differentiate you really. There's minor differences, then you can stick stuff on top of that when you go to market. All of that stuff isn't open source. My look and feel, the way it is, that's usually done. That's how I differentiate myself. And what I've seen is where people anticipate differentiation, they're both less willing to do open source and they're less willing to participate in standardization, but they think there's going to be differentiation in that. If you look at issues like policy, I think some of the hesitation of people to get involved with that is they believe that their ability to implement policy and intent-based processes is actually going to differentiate their projects and their products, and therefore they're going to be a little more hesitant. They're going to be more cautious about what they contribute to the open source world or what they even contribute to the standardized world. Because you'd hate to give away the next $1 billion piece of software, and some of the ideas that people are looking at right now do have that kind of ramification. It's the kind of software if you look at, I've come up with the ultimate optimization algorithm for X in the NFV world. You don't want that to, you wouldn't want to give that away. And I think that you still have a lot of that concern within the companies. But they also are putting a lot of emphasis on, if there's not a differentiator, let's make it open source and come to an industry agreement on what it looks like. And some of it is, it's not, doesn't lend itself to open source, but they say, let's come to some industry agreement on what business processes are. Let's come to industry agreement on what the information model is that allows the processes and the hardware and everything involved with this to interoperate better.
So I guess, is that going to be just another one of those hurdles that we kind of have to get past at some point to make this work down the road? Because it does seem like there are quite a few of those hurdles still out there that need to be worked on. Obviously, open source is looking to at least tackle one of those in a bigger picture sense. But is this going to be one of those maybe smaller battles that obviously big ramifications financially that could hold up the pace? Do you think, or is this a surmountable issue that we can eventually get past?
Well, assuming history will repeat itself, I would say we are going to get, we're going to get past this. If you look at the example of what went on in the computing industry, they got past it. I don't think there's anything so unique about telecom that means, oh no, we can't get past it just because of X. I think there's as many cultural challenges for telco to do this conversion as there are challenges around this open source and the IPR. And unfortunately, there's probably less other industry lessons that we can steal from. At least in the open source arena, we can steal from the lessons that the compute industry went through, the positives that they, how did they get past this from the IPR perspective? How did the Linux group come to be? How does Red Hat add value and make money in the open source world and make money off of open source? So there's examples of that. It's my belief that the telco industry is going to be able to do it faster than the compute industry did, because we're going to steal from them.
I don't like, maybe just borrow, maybe not steal per se, because lawyers. Let's not bring the lawyers involved in this. But
well, yeah, but the reality is it's the same company, just different divisions.
Exactly. Well, Team Inform has been at the center of a lot of this work. I mean, you guys have been doing this stuff for years and years. I mean, I know a lot of organizations have popped up more recently, out of the Linux Foundation, for instance. But I know you guys have been kind of central to a lot of this work. I've been going to some of your shows for years now, and through your Catalyst programs, getting people together, you guys have really been driving this. I guess as Team Inform looks at where we are today, what are maybe the big challenge or two you guys see? I guess towards the continued evolution of this movement towards this new software, this new this new world that telecom is eventually going to be moving towards. I mean, what do you see as maybe some challenges that still need to be kind of maybe tackled? I mean, what should we expect going into the Team Inform event next year, for instance? What's going to happen between now and then, and what do you guys expect to be a big focus from that event?
Well, for particularly around the virtualization space, we're working around a concept we call the Operations Center of the Future. Yep. Which is basically saying, from an end-to-end perspective, what is going to be required to actually manage and monetize that environment end-to-end, across hybrid networks, across multiple technologies. That's also going to include looking to other organizations to work with us to help provide that. We've been working with the MEF around, how do we, and have demos with them that we've been doing for the last 2 years or a year and a half around, how do we use a lot of the concepts that are coming out of our zero touch orchestration, operations, and management program, Zoom, and use those concepts on top of the MEF provisioning stack, and how do we share information across that? How do we get to an end-to-end solution on that? We're broadening that. We're working with ONF and MEF, looking at can we leverage each other across those environments. But we believe that what we're going to be showing in Nice is how do you take the components from the industry, wherever they come from, and have a umbrella capability to glue them together and be able to deliver this end-to-end management capability and monetization capability, which is really one of the key enablers there. And the key questions is, how can I collect the right information from the right places to be able to monetize this? So we're focusing very much on those types of end-to-end issues and looking, how do we get there? How do we demonstrate this? How do we make this real? And that's been the key focus for Nice, and probably the end-to-end is where we see the real big initiative in the industry. You'll see a lot. Everybody's kind of been focused. This is a virtualization challenge. Well, it's not the challenge is, can we do this end-to-end in a hybrid environment? Those are, if I were going to call the two biggest gotchas out there, those are them. Yeah,
that's a good point. You're right. That hybrid issue is going to be a significant point of contention going forward, because these operators have got these networks that are out there working already, and we got these new networks coming online, and making sure everything kind of works together, in a seamless way without clogging up the system. That is going to be a significant challenge to make sure it all kind of, like you said, kind of end to end, everything seems to be working together. That's going to be a big part of this.
Yeah, and there's 2 or 3 different ways people are trying to approach that hybrid network. Do they, is it I manage that through the old stack, or do I put an encapsulation that makes the non-virtualized environment to appear to be somewhat virtualized? I'm not going to have the elasticity. I may not have some of the other capabilities around that segment, but from the upper level, from the service level, I remove the complexity of having to know that, that is a 3G Ericsson deployment, and I have to talk to it using this, and this. Do I encapsulate it? And then the fact that, oh, by the way, I'm issuing the same command over here, and it's running on a completely virtualized stack from a yet unnamed vendor.
Somebody else. Yeah, no, yeah, we get that automation part of it. That's going to be, I mean, that seems, that real time, basically real time automation is such a big part of what this future is going to be, and that still seems like that is going to be definitely a bit of a challenge to get to that point where there's a level of comfort, obviously, too, because telecom operators, we've talked before about this, they are very traditional and conservative companies, but to get that level of comfort with automation out there, making decisions on their network. What's in real time is going to be a big part of this. I mean, some of the guys, ACT for instance, and Telefonica and Orange, they're moving pretty aggressively towards it, but it's still a broad market out there that has to kind of get on board with what's happening in terms of trusting what's going to happen out there.
Yes, and very much so. It's if you looked at what data centers used to run like 20 years ago,
yeah.
They were as bad or worse than the telecoms. You don't touch my disk drive. But look where they're at today.
Yeah.
It's just you throw it in the cloud and it'll stick. So it can be done, and I think it will be accelerated. I know that some of the projections I've seen, they said, "Oh, we're going to always be in a hybrid network." I'm not sure I am a complete believer in that, because the cost differential is going to be so high.
Sure.
The ability, if I said, well, I'm going to have to swap this out, and if I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to go out and I'm going to swap out all these number 5 switches, you'd go, I can't do that. There's too much capital investment in there. Mm-hmm. But if the differentiation in cost and the differentiation in power and energy consumption are close to what the projections are, the economics may be there a lot quicker than people are anticipating. I know I've seen a lot of discussions about this, particularly in the RAN area, mm-hmm. where you have all of these towers and, the base stations are out there and the access points. Just the ability to power them up and down based on load they're viewing that as, millions and millions of dollars of savings. Yeah. And if you think, wow, suddenly my business case swings a lot quicker if the technology can get there at the cost point they think it's going to be. There's some open questions there, but if I was going to be a radical, that would be my place. I'd be radical. It's probably going to happen a lot faster than people think.
And that's a good. I mean, that definitely is, I think, a bit forward-looking, because I agree. I mean, people I've talked to, I mean, they bring up occasionally, even vendors who would benefit the most from this movement as quick as possible. Even they seem to at times think, yeah, this is going to be 10, 15, 20-year process of operators kind of running these dual networks for a while, and eventually, they'll see a cost curve kind of cross each other and make the switch. But even they have been somewhat, pretty conservative, or maybe they're just trying to brace themselves for, expect the worst and hope for the best kind of thing. But that's a good. I mean, that's going to be an interesting part to watch, is how the operators do decide eventually when to kind of flip that switch from going old school to virtualized world. And I guess eventually, once that cost issue gets tackled, that'll probably be a big part of that. But that's going to be interesting to watch how that plays out, because that will be that's a big part of this discussion right now.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And, you're seeing things like 5G and the whole Internet of Everything push this issue. It's not going, it's not going to be the comfortable 3G, 4G migration.
Yeah.
This is going to be, you got to get it there quick.
Yeah.
The latency demands of 5G probably are going to push this quicker than anybody has thought about.
Yeah, no, I mean, you look at autonomous vehicles, for instance. I mean, those things need, if that's ever going to become a reality, the latency issues alone with that are just astronomical. I mean, you have to be on top of things immediately for that to make any sense, especially if you're looking at, these things drive themselves. I mean, that alone, you're right. If that makes the progress that it seems to be making at this point, the networks have to be in place, and that's going to take a lot of work, and that's going to happen. You got to start working on that yesterday for this point, really. I mean, to make that happen.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned the autonomous vehicle, and if that ever becomes a reality, it is a reality. Will it scale?
Yeah,
I mean, it was shocking the number of miles that have already been driven and the number of vehicles that are actually running around in Southern California by themselves daily. I had made the statement way back in April about, if the autonomous vehicle gets here, and then immediately got confronted with the newspaper article that said, "Oh, by the way, this is real."
Take that kind of prognostication to Vegas for yourself or something like that.
Yeah, it was almost embarrassing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'll tell you that it is. How will it scale and how quickly that will roll out, I think, is really going to push some of the issues. But and it's not just a single. Many car dealers are looking at exactly this thing, and they're putting various types of capabilities into their cars. I was really quite amazed when I did a little bit more research into that. I think that's coming a lot quicker than people would anticipate as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a big driver of this too. Well, I mean, before we wrap the conversation, I want to also bring the fact that, I was talking with somebody last week, kind of on the virtualization topic, and they brought up to me the fact that, they've been doing a lot of work with the Zoom project, which you guys have, the Zoom program. And they were just talking, again, about how well that's really helped kind of bring people together and really how it's kind of led a lot of discussions. And so, I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I wanted to also just say to you too that, I've been, just getting people randomly, bringing it up and how helpful those have been. And it seems like, that kind of coming together, which you guys have been doing for a long time anyway, but even these more focused programs like that seem to really be helping. It seems to be helping the ecosystem really move forward at a good pace and bring people together that really need to be talking on the same page on this. So it was just interesting to hear someone kind of just bring that up, randomly, because it's a big part of this.
Yeah, and the Zoom project around NFV is one of our main priorities. It's going to be driving the operations center of the future that I mentioned earlier. Where we've really taken this is on a business focus of the end-to-end service. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we've been bringing in different people from different parts. So like we've got people from the procurement organization mm-hmm. sitting down and talking to us about what do they anticipate the changes to be in procurement. So we're looking at this very holistically, not just here's the technical issues around bringing a VNF in. Here are the changes to the information model. We're also discussing this from a cultural perspective. We're bringing in all the service aspects. I think it's that end-to-end perspective that people find a little different about what TM Forum is doing. Yeah. We're leveraging the fact that we have the end-to-end view from the management perspective that we've developed over all of these years, and trying to build on that and leverage that into this new technology. So, that's really been helpful. And I think the fact that the forum has been concentrating very hard on working and partnering with other SDOs, because it became very obvious as soon as you say, okay, we're going to look at this from end to end. We didn't have all the right smart people around the table. They exist in other organizations. Mm-hmm. So we had to reach out to those organizations to get those people around the table. We started an initiative in July where we were working with the metrics experts from Quest Forum, mm-hmm. NIST, and ETSI, and trying to rationalize the metrics that the forum has developed over the years with the metrics that they've been developing over the years. And that work has really kicked off into a very successful multi-SDO effort. Similarly, around information modeling, it became mm-hmm. very obvious that unless it would make integrating these a lot easier if they all started or agreed to at least some fundamental concepts around the information model at a high level. Everybody's going to differentiate, because down at the the base data technology level for the different technologies, they require different things. Yeah. But if we could start at the higher level, at least from a unified position, it means bringing the stuff back together is much easier. It makes developing any kind of gateways or mediation much simpler if you've come from at least the same universe of understanding. And we've had some real successful work with MEF and ONF, and we've had some of our members pushing the concepts into other organizations as well. And we see we've had quite a bit of successful work with 3GPP over the last several years around unifying this between the the RAN and the backplane or mm-hmm. backbone networks, and how you can do things around performance management that's very similar things around the information model that are very similar. So that has been some very positive stuff that's been forced upon us, particularly by the the end-to-end perspective that we were pursuing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, hey, great. Hey, Ken, we definitely appreciate the great insight today. Obviously, a big topic. We could probably discuss this for another couple hours if we needed to there, but definitely appreciate the great insight on this. And obviously, you guys are doing quite a bit of work at TM Forum and definitely setting up the table there for the next event there in Nice and coming up in, I think, May or June, right? Late May.
It's in May.
May, got it. That sounds good.
It's definitely in May.
All right, well, great insight there from Ken from the TM Forum on the open source being used for NFV and SDN. Well, again, I want to thank everyone for watching this week's show and asking to check us out again next week. Thanks for watching.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN, and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.